welcome back, Raw Thoughts podcast listeners and viewers. Little blurb, if you do not know that this podcast is also on YouTube, I would love for you to go on there, check it out. You can find it at Raw Thoughts Podcast with Mackenzie Tiggs, and like, subscribe, share to your friends, share to your family, getting the word out about this podcast. With that, this podcast is really about bringing on people and hearing their life experiences and sharing them with you. One of my biggest drives in life is just hearing from other people's experiences and how we can gain a little bit of knowledge from that. So today, I actually have one of the behind-the-scenes crews at SB Studios, Ryland, and then his partner, Daniel, and they have their own podcast. So today, we're really diving in deep to see how things differ between the different podcasts, what it looks like, how you can start your own podcast, and why are they becoming so popular. So, Ryland, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Ryland, Ryland Dawson, I guess. I am the lead producer or head producer here at SB Studios, where you currently film out of in this studio.
Woot woot.
I'm also the co-host and producer of one of our podcasts, the Never Know podcast, also on YouTube and Spotify and Apple and, all the podcast platforms. I just graduated Boise State not too long ago, about a month ago now, graduated, degree in media and television. And yeah, so that's kind of why I'm into this kind of stuff.
That's super awesome. And Daniel, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, kind of a lot of the same. I'm also a producer here at SB Studios, and I also help a little bit with like sales and stuff like that. I'm Daniel Thompson. I also just graduated from Boise State. I graduated with a communications major and a marketing minor. So this kind of stuff is right up my alley as well.
So with both of you guys, did you guys meet in college?
Yeah, we met through fraternity. Yeah. Or fraternity brothers.
Very nice. And what made you both want to start a podcast?
I can kind of tell just like the long story. So pretty much about a year ago now, a little over a year ago, we just kind of like came up with the idea, just kind of like, it'd be fun to just make a podcast. It sounds like funny to do or do something fun. And then we had a buddy who graduated last year we were going to do it with. But then he had graduated before we could really get like the ball rolling and stuff like that. And then over the summer I was gone, so we kind of dropped the idea or whatnot. And then when I came back for my last year of school, we were getting drinks at End Zone one night back in like September, and we kind of brought the idea back up. We wanted to give it a shot, and then we were with our other buddy Ross, who was our co-host. He just moved back to the Bay to start work. So we had him come on, and then we just kind of went from there and started having our own podcast. We didn't really know the direction or anything of it. That kind of is
no clue.
It's why we call it the You Never Know podcast. Cause
I think we did the first episode without a name. We just wanted to do it to at least see if like we could do it, because it's kind of intimidating coming into a room with the lights and the cameras, and it's like, okay, talk for 45 minutes at least.
Right.
It's very intimidating, and especially when it's a different dynamic than, I try to tell people that come on, like, it's just like we're sitting and having coffee, but we're not having coffee. We're just talking. Yeah. And that can feel very overwhelming to them of like, oh my gosh, I'm on the spotlight. Like, what if I mess up? What if, I say something and I don't actually mean to say it that way?
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? It's raw. Like, that's what we say. That's what makes us human. Like, let's go for there.
And that's like a good point of a podcast too, is you're here to just kind of talk and release your thoughts. Like, just, let them out. Yeah. Maybe you slip up something, you can edit it out or whatever. But it's like, I'd say the majority of podcasts are all just, conversations and, more of a raw conversation that people can listen to.
Yeah. And how did you guys, you knew you wanted to start a podcast, but how did you get into SB Studios specifically?
So, I don't know if you remember the old producer Travis, or some people call him Young Fabio.
Yeah.
He was the producer to start here, and he was also in our fraternity. So we kind of already had that connection of being friends with him. We were, able to come in and kind of do like a homie hookup, and he let us do our first episode for free, and then to see if we could do it, and then we liked it, so he was able to give us a friends and family discount, and we're like, that's how we got into it, really. Like,
yeah.
We knew someone here, And that was when SB Studios, or was back when it was Speak Studios, I guess. They were promoting really heavily on Instagram, and I think that's kind of what brought the initial idea way back in last year. And then when it brought it back up, I know SB like rebranded.
So with your guys' dynamic of a podcast, how do you actually get your people to come on to your podcast? I mean, do you reach out to them? Do you have a list?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
So when we first were getting started, I'd say it was a lot still testing the waters. Like, he'd never really been in front of the camera. I hated being in front of the camera, which I don't go in front of the camera. I sit behind the desk over there and talk from behind there. But when we first get started, we're like, hey, we'll just have, some interesting people that are our friends. So maybe like the more, like we did Jenna Vitamonte, who's a Boise State cheerleader. She's also dating the Boise State starting quarterback. We had a DJ from downtown that was pretty popular, that he was also just graduating. And we also just kind of had some of our, fraternity buddies that had really good stories to tell, or maybe some incident or something like that. So that's kind of how we started with guests. But then obviously you run out of people, especially here in Boise. There's not a very big pool to pull from. So then we kind of started going, okay, who has some influence, right? Who has some influence not only in Boise or connections from maybe high school that people would know? I have a friend I went to actually all the way through middle school with. He is Logic, the rapper's just right-hand man. He was his filmer, and now they're literally best friends. So I reached out to him and said, hey, man, I have a podcast. Would you be down to come on? So it was kind of just hitting him up DM. But then we started also run out of room there. So it was okay, we're going to have to get a little creative here and either reach out via email, via DM, connection through a previous guest. So that's kind of how now it works. We have a list of kind of who we want to have on and talk to, but it's just a matter of reaching out to them. And I'd say DM, email, and kind of phone a friend is our main way right now.
Yeah.
Speaking of the emails and stuff, there's a stretch there where we were sending emails to anybody and anyone we could think about.
20 emails a day, and then I try and follow up the same week if I didn't hear back. It was crazy. That kind of got a little burnt out and just too busy. But yeah, there was a stretch where I was emailing a ton of people, their managers, their agencies, them directly. If I could find an email that was related to them, I was shooting an email.
So that's what I was going to ask. About the burnout. You were going to college, you're working here, and
graduating.
You're graduating, and you're doing your own podcast. How do you manage all of those things?
It's a lot, especially for me, because I produce it, I edit it, I have to make the clips for social media, I do all the thumbnails and the graphics. Danger is more of the work that happens during the podcast. He does most of the interview questions, most of the backs, researching the guests. But it was a lot, and it was just something that I found joy in it, because I was just a media person, and I like doing the podcast this style because it's a live edit with a live cut, and I just think that it brought me joy, so it wasn't really too overwhelming. But then obviously stuff comes up in life with work and stuff, and that's how the burnt out kind of happened.
Yeah. And what about you? Do you feel any of that as well?
I honestly probably not as much as Ryland, because like he said, he was doing a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, making it look good. I kind of just, like he said, would research the guests and then kind of lead the interview. And I wasn't really working either at the during the school year, so it was kind of just kind of a side thing for me. So I probably found more pure joy in it than work like Ryland. But I would kind of, I wouldn't say burn out, but it would get kind of tiresome, reaching out to anyone on email and Instagram or whatnot, and not hearing back or getting told no, stuff like that.
It almost became not a task, but it almost became this is so much, and not, I don't want to just do this right now, it was just it was almost a different kind of burnout.
It almost gets exhausting.
Yes.
I can definitely feel that on this side where, you're doing, obviously you guys edit this, put it out into the world, and that's a huge relief on me, because before I found the studio, I was thinking about doing it myself, but I'm gosh, I really want guests on. I don't want to do it via Zoom. I am not a high-tech girl. I maybe in the age range, but that's not me. And then also you want a location. I don't want them coming to my house or, then there's all of that stuff. And but it gets tiresome of like reaching out and you're talking about it and then also doing real estate and then you're talking to all these people and I'm like, honestly, I don't want to freaking talk to anybody right now. And I think that's the exhaustion more than a full burnout of what we're doing.
We're on the smaller scale side. I couldn't imagine having like a Joe Rogan or like Logan Paul's podcast where they literally are banging them out probably multiple a week. And if they don't deliver, like they have a million fan base plus to deliver to that will either be unhappy or satisfied.
Right.
So I couldn't even imagine like that scale.
You know,
I want to be there.
I was going to say, I almost want to be at that scale because I mean, my manifestation comes in where I'm like, okay, if I'm doing that good and producing that much, then the back end stuff is getting a lot more fixed, right? You're monetizing things, you're bringing people on, you know, to be able to help pay.
It also makes it easier though, because if you're bigger platform, then you're going to be able to have access to bigger guests.
Yes. And you're able to leverage from people on like, hey, this is your expertise. Like you do that part of it and I'll just talk. Yep. Like if I could honestly just
you
have
build out a team.
Building out a team. Absolutely. If I could find somebody to do, you know, like all of my social media, which I know there's people out there, 100%. I absolutely do, but it's finding the right person for what you want to promote.
Especially your style, because there's so many different ways of, I mean, I do, as a producer, I do 18 different shows a week almost, and almost everyone has a different style or editing style or intro, outro, or they like it, you know, volume-wise even, like, it's crazy just the different combinations you can do in editing just different shows.
Am I one of your simpler people? Because I just don't care.
I wouldn't even say it's simpler. I think that the more simpler it is, I think it's the better, because when you chop up a podcast so much or do so many edits, it almost seems unnatural.
It's like unauthentic almost.
Yeah, and I'll listen. Some of them that are the sticklers, like I'll listen to them, like I'll edit them, like, you know, I'm going to re-edit that and I'm going to put the mess up back in because it sounds better. It just sounds more authentic.
Yeah, and there were a couple of times I was producing for like people would come in and do their first episode, and it was like every 5-10 seconds they'd be like, wait, like let me restart, I messed up that word or I stuttered. And you know, I was like, you know, it's not like you're reading a script, it's not like a movie, it's supposed natural. It's supposed to sound natural, and if you stutter or like have to pause for a sec, like that doesn't make it doesn't mean you're a bad podcaster. That makes it more authentic.
Right. And it makes us more human at the end of the day. You know, that's a very big drive of mine is like, we all mess up. We're human, you know, like it's okay. So. Like it's okay to have those things. I was actually recently over at my sister's house and I walked in to get my nephews and niece, and they had the podcast up on YouTube and they were watching it, and it went to my outro and I was like, oh my gosh, I looked so nervous. And I actually don't listen to mine. I don't watch them, nothing. And so I honestly have no idea when people are like, oh, this got messed up, that I'm like, I don't know. It's people reaching out to me that they're like, hey, it's not on there.
That's a good thing to have, is like, that means you have an audience that tunes in weekly that's, hey, like this maybe is a little wrong. I mean, obviously then I get the frantic text and I'm on the other end of it, but it's like, that's a good kind of thing to have though, is, hey, there's people like, you know, watching. It's not fake numbers, like it's legit numbers.
And it's funny when like you talked about like kind of the nervous thing. Like I was pretty nervous the first, like I think we called our episode 0 like the trial before we had a name or anything.
Our trial 0 was terrible.
And I remember hearing Larry King say that his first like broadcasting job was like he did some local radio, and he was so nervous, and so first thing he said was, "Hi, my name's like Larry King. I'm super nervous to do this. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm gonna go for it." And I remember that when we started the podcast. So that's like the first thing I said.
I think you opened with that.
Yeah, I kind of just, you know, did what Larry King did. And it honestly like helped a lot. And then Ross was like, oh, I'm terrified right now.
Yeah.
And then honestly after that, the jitters kind of went away, and I get like good jitters, like especially if I'm super excited about the guest, but it's never like the nervous jitters. Like,
right.
I think the nervous jitters only come to me when we're doing someone that we've never met before. That gets a little intimidating. Like, oh, like, you know, are they serious? Are they kind of goofing around? Like, yeah, like that can get a little intimidating.
When we had Gastor Amonte on, he's a comedian from Brooklyn who's had like millions of views on YouTube and stuff like that. And that was probably like the first one since our first episode where I did kind of have those jitters, because, you know, there's, you know, fairly big deal out of Brooklyn who's decided to do a podcast with two kids from Boise, Idaho. It was
Yeah.
like, I didn't know what the dynamic was going to be like. He was super cool and easygoing, but
Yeah.
Did he fly here? Like
So-
how, or did you do it over video?
The story is that I found out from a coworker he was hosting an event in the Boise State Student Union like the week before we did a podcast, or like a couple weeks before we did a podcast. So, but I DM'd him like right away, like, hey, I saw you're in Boise. Like, we have a podcast. You want to come on like real quick? And he DM'd like literally 2 minutes later. I'm literally at the Boise airport right now. My flight leaves in 2 hours. I was like, and he's like, if you can do it right now, he's like, I'll do it. But we were both in class, I think. And so I was like, oh man, I was like, we're going to see if you could do it tomorrow night. He's like, yeah, man, sorry. He's like, I'm down to do a Zoom one though. So we ended up Zooming him in.
Wow.
And, yeah, it was pretty cool.
I would have been like, screw school. This is a great experience.
There was like something that was like, I think either I was in class or he was in class. There was like something conflicting that we couldn't do, or maybe the studio was booked. There was something. There was a reason why we couldn't do it.
Still, if I was in class, I would be like, peace out, teacher. Sorry, gotta go do this.
Well, I'm kind of glad it happened the way it did. Like, obviously in person, I enjoy more than Zoom, but if he texted me like, yo, go to the studio right now, we're gonna have this guy on, and I have no idea who he is, it probably would have been a lot sloppier.
So we at least got to watch. I think I bought like his Netflix special like the day before, watched it. We watched like all his YouTube clips, just kind of get a vibe of who he was. He had his own podcast that we watched an episode of, so
that's awesome.
He was awesome.
That's awesome. So do you guys, help with anybody starting podcasts, or like what does that look like?
It's kind of our job to help people starting podcasts, but a lot of people that like, friends or family, I'll give suggestions, or, why not start a podcast about that? Like, they'll say something like an idea. I'm like, that's a great idea to start a podcast about.
Yeah.
Like, oh, there's some, like, no, there's really not that many podcasts out. Like, yes, there's a lot, but in the scheme of things, there's not that much. Or people do it for a couple episodes and they'll fall off.
Yeah. I remember when I came in here with Travis, and he had it. Now, don't quote me on all of the numbers, but I think it was like 2 million podcasts are out there, but only like 30% are still continuing after episode like 6.
Mm-hmm.
And
something like that.
It was actually
close.
Pretty remarkable. But people that look back on podcasts or listen to them, sometimes you don't know when that actually aired. I've listened to things that were, they had like 3 episodes. I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to listen more. And then they're done after 3, episodes, and there's no more to listen to. And it was clear back in 2016, I'm listening to it. I'm like,
yeah,
that's the cool part about a podcast, is that the information that you're giving to the world is going to continue to be in the world for people to access.
Yeah.
Throughout time.
Yeah. Well, it's like David Letterman had it's like a vodcast, a video podcast that he does through Netflix. And it's like, I think my next guest needs no introduction, and he does, fairly big name people, but he just had one they were promoting. It was a Will Smith episode. I'm like, oh, they're probably talking about the whole thing that happened at, what was it, the Oscars or whatever, and that whole traumatized event. And I looked up like kind of just the debrief of it, and they're like, oh, it was filmed last year, like before that even happened. So they were just kind of banking it, got lucky that Will Smith was in that incident, and then they're pushing it. So I'm sure that episode did great.
Wow.
But they didn't talk about it because it was filmed way before.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Gary Vee is probably my favorite, just on like content creation.
Yeah.
Of like video it, get it out there. Even if, you have put it out there once, continue to put it out there, because maybe you have new followers, or maybe somebody didn't see that, or they didn't catch on things. And it's just like, just freaking do it. Like you said, why not? Like that was my very first podcast name. I actually got that tattooed on my finger recently. We now have an Airbnb called Why Not? Like live your life.
Yeah.
Definitely. Know? That's super cool. So Daniel, you talked about, doing the research on the people. What and how do you structure your own podcast?
Yeah, so usually like the couple days, like before anything, we find the guest, right? So once we get that confirmation, hey, they're down to do it, we'll do it on this day. If I know them, and like obviously you don't have you can't look them up on Google or anything like that, I'll just kind of think of like good question to ask them. Like our first guest, or one of our first guests, was just one of our friends, but I remember he told me one time he like worked at a summer camp, like as a camp counselor for little kids, you know, over the summer in high school. So I wrote that down, like ask about being a camp counselor. And I sit there and I think of like small stuff I know about them and just kind of just ask it, you know, even if I already know the answer, stuff that I think is going to be interesting that they have done in their lives or something about them. I ask that. But if it's somebody I don't know, like when we had, you know, Logic's Ryan JT Clementi on, I did a little research on him, kind of looked at some of his work, asked Ryland about him in middle school and high school. Same with like the comedian, looking him up online, and then just kind of jotting notes about stuff I want to ask about.
And then you just go for it.
Go for it. I mean, everywhere podcast, we structure with, you know, who are you, like where are you from, what's your story, but then that's when he dives into his questions. And he structures really good, and it allows me, because he has like very intricate questions that allows me to like, oh, he missed maybe this section or that section of it. So it allows me or Ross to come in and kind of ask like a side question of it that kind of varies off of it, which is good.
And yeah, something that's interesting is that like the questions I ask, they're the questions that lead the kind of direction of the episode. But I'd say they're like 20% of the questions I actually ask. Most of them are, they said something, like told a story, and then I kind of asked for them to like elaborate off that or go more in depth about this.
A lot of rabbit holes.
Yeah, we dive into a lot of rabbit holes.
And going back to the thing where you said that, hey, you know the answer, but the people watching probably don't. So it's like,
they have no idea. Yeah. I mean, they have no idea that usually before, you know, it actually gets recorded, we're probably having the exact same questions.
That's the hardest part of podcasting, especially with new people or your friends, is that you're laughing, telling stories, or, you know, saying an experience that happened to you this weekend. And it's like, wait, stop. Like, we're not recording yet. Although we're going to run out of content way too quick. It's the worst.
Sometimes, I mean, maybe you could send it to me. Sometimes the pre and post actual recording that gets, you know, put out there, sometimes there's some funny things that get said.
What I started doing. I started recording here pre's on a few episodes. I don't have them all recorded, but for us, I kind of I'll just push record on a lot of our episodes, like probably a couple minutes before, and kind of get some of that raw like footage before we even like sit down and are serious. And I'll throw that in before we start our intro. So it's like kind of like a teaser, a clip of like our mood and our energy. And then I'll go into our intro. And then if I forget to, I'll just take like a clip from it and then put it before. But
That's
it's
awesome.
like, it's really cool to see like just our natural like.
Yeah, it's funny. In like the last couple episodes, I'll just be like talking with the co-host and the guest.
About something stupid too.
Yeah, and then like something not even about them or anything, just the weather or whatever. And then Ryland will be like, all right, you know, start whenever. I'm like, oh, are we rolling? He's like, yeah. And then he puts in the intro. So it's always kind of a funny transition.
The fun one was we did a remote podcast. Our buddies own a retail business, Idaho Living, and they had a brand new office that no one's ever seen. So we're like, well, instead of having you guys come to the studio, let's go do the podcast there. I was like, I think I can gather up enough stuff to do a mobile podcast. And the one before, like the intro clip before the actual intro went, was like, I think I was going around the table, like opening everyone's beers there. Like it was really funny, but it was cool because it wasn't in the studio. So it was like a really cool background.
That is one of your guys's that I watched because I mean, they're a great brand. They do a lot locally. Yeah. And so I was watching and I was like, oh, that's super cool that they're going out there. And then that brings me to the question of where do you guys want to take your podcast?
It's a great question.
We've had a lot of talks recently
about this.
About like, because probably like 2 months ago, we were like, all right, Ross is leaving soon. We're going to graduate. We wanted to do like a total rebrand where we do overhaul. Like more segments, more stuff that would like translate better to like TikTok and stuff like that. And then we wanted to like change the name too, because we started to kind of get a vibe, even though we'd have like random guests on, we had more of a vibe. It was like, tell us about you and your life. And instead of just you never know, because we don't know what we're doing, it was more of a you never know, like, let's ask questions that people would never ask them, or some like questions.
It's just something you'd learn about the guest, so you'd never know. Yeah. That's kind of the direction we kind of pointed, and then we pointed out a name change, and we're like, we'll scrap that.
Nothing stuck. We had a couple like ideas, but after we slept on it, I'm like, I think if we ever do change the name or anything like that, it has to be like, we say the idea and we're like, oh, that's it. Like, right. Perfect. You know, like no hesitation.
It's like like it has to just be that, right? Like it just has to happen naturally. Like I don't want to overthink and just like
you don't want it to force it to be something if it's not that thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, with bringing these people on, I mean, starting a community around this, like what would your end goal like? Or I mean, if somebody else moves away, like you guys just graduated college, you have a lot of life in between there. That it could go different ways.
Very much so. And so like it's like even come across me like, oh, like, you know, if he gets a job somewhere else, like do I do it solo? Like do we Zoom him in? Do I just start like branch off and do my like, you know, or vice versa, you know, if I move away, like do I start one or does he keep going? So it's been weird. We haven't really it's kind of more of like we'll get there when we get there. Because it's at least in the near future, at least I bought myself a year in Boise to at least stay and like commit to the podcast and like try and grow it. Because I watched like it was like a Mr. Beast podcast where he's like, you know, I posted 1,000 videos that only got 800 views, and then you know one of them finally clicked off, and that's what started it. So I'm like, you know, I'm okay with posting, you know, a podcast every week or whatever, a couple a week or one a month until we hit episode 100. And if there's really no traction by 100, then it's like, okay, then maybe we, you know, focus on something else or go another way. But you never know. We're only on, 22, I think?
Yeah.
We're on, 22. Like, still have 80 episodes that we need to do and before we, you know, kind of make a final decision.
Before you kind of throw in the towel on those things.
Yeah.
It's crazy because I remember you had texted me not too long ago. And you were like, "What did you do different on this podcast?" And I was like,
"That was a dope one."
It was dope. Yeah. It was with Douglas Brock, and I was like, I have no idea. I didn't do anything different, and so it's strange trying to figure out.
Just an algorithm. It's so weird.
It's so and that stuff I don't understand by any means. I'm like, okay, I need the brains behind the computer to do all of that.
The weird thing is that we didn't like tag it different. Like I was just a rinse and repeat with that one. I posted it with title, like same thing as always. But when I was scrolling through the numbers, it was like, you know, all your normal numbers. And then one had like way more than the other one. I'm like, the heck? I was like, oh, he must have promoted it or, you know, it got posted on a brand or something. But you're like, no, I normally did. So
no, I mean, and he did, you know, share the stories, you know, that I usually post. I'm sure but
most of the guests, you know, do that.
All of my guests have that. You know, one of the guests has like, I don't know, she has like 41,000 followers or something. Like it's insane. And I was like, I would have expected from her sharing that it's going to get traction, but it's kind of those things, you know, even on Instagram, like the stupid reels are the ones that usually take off or. You know, on my stories, it's the dumb stuff that people are like totally connect with you and they're like, oh, that's what it is. And I'm like, okay, you got to do more of the dumb stuff. I mean, I don't say it like that,
it's just
but
more
it's
like more of, I'd say, I actually heard this last night of like more of showing your real personality or like exaggerating your personality. That's what people like gravitate towards, which is really weird because if you were to do that in public, especially here, people look at you funny. Like the whole influencer stage hasn't hit boys yet at all.
No.
You walk around with a camera or like doing something on the street, everyone's like, what the heck is that guy doing? Like, you know, put your phone away, dude.
Yep.
Like, but like if you go to LA or, you know, Miami, New York, like it's just normal. Like, oh, there's another influencer, like big deal, which it's like so weird here that like it hasn't hit here yet.
And I think maybe, I mean, it's having grown up here, we're usually 10 to 20 years behind everywhere else, you know, with our stores. We're having a lot of growth to our area. Obviously, I sell real estate. We're seeing that. We're seeing the numbers. We're seeing, you know, the growth within our community. But at the same time, that, I mean, transition for now, these influencers to come and be a part of that pool that's moving here, we're still way far behind.
Which is weird because it's growing so rapidly. You think that portion would even grow faster than the growth here because social media in the past, 5 years have grown probably the most rapid thing there is. So it's just, I don't know, it's interesting, but like going back to the dumb TikToks and Reels, I posted a TikTok the other day. I got this like drink cooler, right? You put ice in it, you put water in it, you put the drink on, and it just spins it and gives it a water bath.
Oh.
It's super dumb. I bought it when I was absolutely hammered downtown on accident. But anyway, I saw a TikTok of it because I think I bought it off of TikTok. Well, that TikTok went viral, so I said, well, I'm going to post one of it and just see what happens. I think it's at 1.3 million views right now.
Oh, my God.
And I'm just getting flamed because I bought warm beer. I was like, I tagged it really dumb, but like, I was like, it makes my warm beer ice cold, and it's like a warm Busch Light.
Oh, my gosh.
Like, that thing's a waste of money. That thing sucks. Like, just put it in your fridge. And so I was just being a smart ass and just replied to every comment like, oh, like, why put it in the fridge? I don't have that much time. Like, this does it in 30 seconds. So it was really funny. But, like, it's such a dumb video, and it's the slowest video ever. But, yeah, it's at 1.2 million. I'm like, well, that's weird. It doesn't make sense.
Do you guys really dive into your analytics as a podcast?
I'm a huge analytic person. I'm analytic for my Instagram, our podcast Instagram, our YouTube. Like, I geek out over analytics. I love them.
What about you?
In the beginning, I was all about it, but recently I haven't really like thought about it because like in the beginning I was always rewatching, just being my like own worst critic and stuff like that, and caring so much about like because I think it was on Spotify. You could see like kind of like heat spots on like a world map of like where people have tuned into your podcast, and we had people in like every continent almost like have viewed it, and like
it's really crazy.
Yeah, and like that stuff was like super insane to me in the beginning, but I think I just kind of got used to it and kind of at a point where like it's cool. I would love to see like if something does pop off, that's insane, but I'm not like kind of crazy over it like I was in the beginning.
Yeah.
Do you think it's because you truly enjoy doing this and that doesn't technically matter? Like why do you think you guys are different on that aspect?
I think I'm just a nerd and I like numbers and like patterns and stuff like that. And maybe I have like ADHD or something too, but
or that's just your personality.
That too. But like not that I'm like worried about them. I think they're fascinating. Like I think the whole algorithm is fascinating. Like how does a person in, Vancouver, Canada find our pod? Like why? Yeah. Or there was one, it was like in Brazil. I'm like, why is that? Okay, maybe it was like they clicked on it accidentally or whatever and I got the view, but I'm like, it just fascinates me, that stuff. I'm not like, I don't obsess over them like, oh, I need better analytics. I need this. Yes, I'd love to boost them, but I know you can't just boost analytics like that.
Right.
It's a slow growth and I'm aware of that. I just like looking at them.
I think it kind of goes to the difference too of like being a media major versus a comm major. With like media, that's what shows success is like the analytics, how many people are watching, how long are they listening for, where are they listening from, stuff like that. And being like a comm major, I'm more about like honing my interview skills and talking to interesting people and like sparking a useful or at least entertaining conversation.
You're the gatherer, almost like you gather you're the one who brings in the more analytics, because you're honing your craft in a sense.
Yeah.
So people are coming in to watch you, and I am just there to watch and be like, oh, this is good. Keep doing it.
Yeah. I was going to say, you and I feel like are more on the wavelength of like just going in there, speaking with them, talking with them. And then he's more like the back end person, which works for you guys. I mean, it definitely works for you guys in leveraging what your expertise are. Like we can't all be perfect at all of this.
Definitely.
But it's interesting to see your guys' dynamic that you guys are co-hosts together, and you have a third one too, right?
It was Ross, but he's the one who just moved away.
Gotcha. But, having that collaboration of like, hey, here's this idea, but maybe we could change it or maybe we could shift it a little bit different, where there's me that I'm like, honestly, I don't know what the frick I'm doing. I'm just doing it. Yeah. But then you hear feedback from people,
Definitely.
And then that's kind of your redirection or figuring it out. And the more and more I listen to other podcasts, it's like, honestly, there's not a right or wrong way. It's just whatever feels right for you.
Yeah.
And doing that.
And I'm such like, I ingest a lot of, at least before I started working here, I watched a lot of like video podcasts and a lot of like just very trendy podcasts. And I basically built and formed like our intro music, our intro, like the way it's structured. Like I kind of struck that around the podcast that I watched that I knew were getting a lot of views. And then, he's essentially the face, the front end, and I'm the back end, which I think is a perfect team because you have the front and the back, and then the guest makes the middle.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what I was going to say is I feel like I kind of take care of everything in front of the camera, and he takes care of everything, behind the camera.
Absolutely.
Which I'd rather be there. I hate being in front of the camera. I've gotten used to it, but like going through college, like being a TV person, there was one show every year where everyone in the control room had to switch. So everyone that was talent went to the control room, and everyone that was in the control room went to the talent. And it was a shit show. It was terrible every time. It was the funniest thing ever, but it was so bad because all of us crew people were so nervous to be in front of the camera.
Oh.
And all the people that were talent never doesn't know how to work anything.
They're like, what does this do?
Exactly. They're just pushing buttons and like making sounds. It's funny.
But that really comes down to, who we are as people is like we have our strengths and we have our weaknesses. And the sooner that we can figure out what those strengths and weaknesses are, we're only doing ourselves a benefit, in the world to be our best humans that we can be. I think sometimes it's hard when people are like, oh, how did you do that? I'm like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Don't know.
Yeah.
I wish I knew so I could keep doing it, but I honestly have no idea. Or like, why were you not afraid of that? I have no idea. I just jumped off the ledge. We'll figure it out on the way.
Yep.
And some people don't have that kind of, drive or ambition or lack of fear to do those and to teach them. Like, I'm sure you guys get questions about like, oh, I'd be so afraid to go onto a podcast. I can't do that. And I'm like, honestly, it's not terrible.
Yeah.
But for them, it's probably very terrifying.
We had friends like, hey, get me on the podcast. I want to be on the podcast. And we'd ask them like, oh, actually, is it going to be live? Or like, because we used to do our podcast live on YouTube. And they're like, ooh, maybe I'll hold off, like, it's like, whatever. Like,
my favorite is when somebody comes on and they're super nervous in the beginning, but by the end of the podcast, they're like super comfortable and they like almost won't stop talking.
Yeah.
Like I love seeing that. And that's like part of the reason, like I really enjoy doing, like starting a podcast. It's cause I like in school and stuff, I was always super hit or miss with like public speaking. I'd rather just be totally fine up there. And then there were other days where I'd be, terrified.
Just wreck.
And, so, I always say like public speaking and a couple of other classes like journalism and stuff were my favorite in college because I actually learned skills and I overcame, like actual fear. And I think that's why I love when sometimes on purpose, I'll bring on one of our friends who I know like kind of camera shy, usually kind of more reserved. And then they come on and at first they're a little shaky and stuff, but by the end of it, they're super comfortable and having a great time. And I love seeing that and love like helping people kind of overcome that fear of like getting out of their comfort zone and telling their story and everything like that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Public speaking is actually one of the biggest fears for like everybody.
Yeah.
Which is, I get nervous and I've done speeches in front of a college board. I've done in front of the Capitol or legislation. Like there's so many different things and I'm very nervous and people are like, oh, you're so well spoken. I'm like, really? I sounded like
the podcast helps.
It does.
Like, it helped me. I don't care if I'm out here now. Like, big deal. Like,
yeah.
And I like to talk, and I think a podcast allowed me to just keep talking. Like,
yeah,
it's fun.
It gives you a reason to continue to talk. Were you ever told by your teachers in grade school that you were the one that was always talking?
Yep.
How about you, Daniel?
Yeah. There, especially in like elementary school, there's a lot of times they'd be like, Daniel, can you wait till I'm done with this student and then you can share with the class or, whatever.
I'd say actually I was probably hit or miss. Like I'm an introvert in some situation, but an extrovert in most others. Like there's some situations where it's like, going out a big group the first time, I'm pretty quiet and reserved to like kind of read the room or the vibe and kind of see like who, like what everyone else's vibe is. But there's other times where like, I'll be like, yeah, center of attention or, whatever the case may be. And it's whatever.
Yeah, I definitely go through like waves too, where like in elementary school, I was always wanting to be the center of attention. Then like towards the end of middle school, high school, I was like the more reserved, like introvert. And then came into college. I think it has just a lot to do with like your environment and stuff like that. It is really weird. Like I feel like it's honestly rare to be like a complete extrovert like your whole life and then or be a complete introvert. I think it's very much like situational, like headspace and environment, everything like that.
Who you surround yourself with.
It is, and I think it's a comfort level too. When you feel a little bit more comfortable, you can feel a little bit more extrovert. It's not like a one or another. It's a gradient, because I know specifically for me, I can be very extrovert, but then I need to recover myself as well. So I need to be that introvert, like, hey, I'm going to sulk in my bedroom, not talking to anybody. Yeah. I don't want to do anything because I've kind of expended like all my energy on different things.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
speaking of teachers, I just remember always on my report cards, my mom always getting, phone calls of like, Mackenzie's very talkative. She really likes to talk. And now I'm like, look, Mom, look at what those teachers.
I don't think I ever got that far where like I got a phone call home or like a parent teacher meeting.
Oh, yeah.
The only one that was always like the Debbie down on the report card was the penmanship. I have terrible handwriting. And it's like, I remember I got one like really bad grade in second grade on my handwriting. And from then it's just like cursed me. I've never had good handwriting. Like, look at my name tag. It looks like a second grader wrote it. It's not the best.
I was the same way in like elementary school. I remember my parents would come back from like the parent teacher nights or whatever, and they'd be like, "Yeah, your son's like really," because in like elementary school I was like one of like the smart ones, and then I kind of I guess I dumbed down when I got older. But in elementary school, the teachers would be like, "He got 100%. Like he knows what he's doing." And I can tell, but I can't read what he just wrote. I'm like, I'm sure it's right, and I can tell he's doing the math right, but I can't really understand what he's saying.
He has not enough patience for that. Yeah. Where are you guys now from college? You're graduating college. You're doing this podcast. You're just living life, like job wise. Like, who are you guys now from college?
That's a tough one. There's been I've kind of put myself in a position where it's a good position where there's a lot of opportunity, but it's bad because I hate picking like between different routes because like I was looking at a lot of media jobs. I was looking at a couple jobs that I got referred to from a buddy. Obviously I want to stay here and then I could do the podcast. So it's like I'm very in the middle of the road right now. It all kind of just comes down to like my financial situation and what I do is probably going to be best for that. But like there's some really big things coming up with the studio right now that I really am trying to hold off. Like I'm running out of time, but I'm also running out of money to keep holding off. So, I mean, I'm in a good spot. I'm still looking for like a full-time gig as of right now, but with kind of what's going on in the world, I don't think it'll be too hard to find like a full-time gig.
What would be your dream job?
I think my grandma asked me that, or someone asked me that, a relative asked me that the other day. I'm like, I have no idea. I just don't have, like, I don't have, when I was young, I wanted to be a pilot, and then they found out I was colorblind, so I couldn't be a pilot. And then, like, I don't know, I guess my dream job would be wherever I'm just, like, what is the saying, if you go to work happy, you never work a day in your life. Mm-hmm. I think just doing that would be my dream job. What
about you? What are you doing now that you've graduated and...
Yeah, I'm kind of in a similar boat. I've been working part-time for the last few months here at the studio, and I'll be doing that for the next little while. I'm going to start working full-time next month. Where I'm going to work's a little iffy, but I know in the next month I'll start working full-time. I'm in the same boat. Like, I'm really passionate about the studio and the direction we're going, and I think it has potential to be something bigger than ourselves and something we can be a part of. So I want to keep, kind of my feet in the water when it comes to the studio, but financially too, I'm pretty drained at this point, so I need to kind of build that bag back up and go from there. But I'd say, I want to be in Boise for at least a year. Big reason is the podcast. I want to see what it can do. And then after that, I think long term, when I say like my own boss, I don't mean necessarily like I have my own business, but in the sense of like I have my own podcast where I make money and it's something I'm passionate about and enjoy doing it. So kind of like he said, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. That's kind of the same vibe I'm looking for. I haven't necessarily found it, but I've kind of come to realize the last year or 2 years or so that the media world is that, rather it's behind the scenes, like not even close to the camera, like doing media sales or, something like that. Or if it is in front of the camera, interviewing or, really anything in the media or broadcasting world, I think long term is what would probably make me the happiest.
And are you guys both from the Boise area, or where did you guys come from? How'd you find BSU?
I'm from Southern California. It's a small town called Yucaipa. I didn't sneeze, but it's what it's called, Yucaipa. It's in the San Bernardino area, or I like to say Palm Springs because more people have heard of Palm Springs, and it's a nice area than San Bernardino. But I found Boise State through my dad was on a work trip when I was like in 5th or 6th grade here, and that was when Boise was like really like just it was on its come up. It wasn't where it's at now, still very small, but they had like a 10-year vision plan or like 10-year vision meeting. My dad like went to that because he was like bored in his hotel or whatever.
He was what?
He was like bored in his hotel. Like he didn't. His meetings were over for the day, like working.
Gotcha.
So he's like,
Bored
I'm gonna
in his
go,
hotel. Okay.
like go to this meeting. And so he came home from that trip. And he's like, Boise State's gonna be a super dope place to go to college if they follow through with that plan when you're like ready to go to school. And I had no interest in like going to college. I didn't care about college sports. I was like, okay, I'll go to Boise State. That's where I'll go. It's not home. I didn't even know they had a blue football field. I was like, whatever. So that's how I arrived here, was kind of just that. And then it happened to be my 2 older cousins came here. So it looked like I was following them, but I'm like, no, I wanted to go here since like 2010. Like this has been like my like plan, not a dream, but a plan. And so that's how I got to Boise.
Wow. And how about you?
Yeah, so I was born in San Jose, but my family moved out here when I was 5, halfway through kindergarten. And, so I've been raised here my whole life. My parents live out in Star. And when it came to Boise State, it was weird. Like, I never, like, when it came time for college, I just always associated, like, Boise State and college. It was almost like, in my mind, there was no other college. I'm not saying it was like, oh, Boise State or nothing. Like, I didn't even have that mindset. It was just like, when I go to college, it's Boise State. I didn't even, like, applying for other schools never even, like, crossed my mind. It was super weird. It was just, like, almost in my own world, Boise State was the only college without even me realizing that it's not true.
Yeah.
That was my same plan. I applied to Boise and Cal State Fullerton because that's where my dad went. Me and my dad are really close. The minute I got into Boise, I accepted it, and then I got waitlisted the next week for Fullerton. Didn't accept the waitlist position, so I didn't get into Fullerton, but I only applied to Boise State.
Wow.
So it was either Boise State, Fullerton, or community college. So that was my plan.
And do you think the schools around here, impacted at all of like directing you to BSU, or were they like, hey, here's all these other, colleges that you could be presented with? Or
I don't think they were like, you should go to Boise State. Obviously they would recommend it or whatnot, but like in the hallways in high school, they had like the big board of like where everybody's going across the country, and they were big on the WUI program where you can switch with another student from out of state and pay in-state. So I know, like, I think Wazoo and a lot of the California schools had that with Boise State. So a lot of people from my high school went a lot of, different places. I think they were pretty supportive of you finding, like, the right fit for you.
Yeah. What is your guys' overall thoughts of BSU and the campus and the environment within it?
You want to go first on this one? I got a long spiel.
Yeah, so I think overall it's a great school, super like supportive system, everything like that, great programs no matter what major you go into. But I think they're not behind on the times, but I think they're more of like a follower school. I don't, they kind of just do what a lot of the other big schools do, right? So when it comes to like COVID or any kind of decision, it's kind of like they wait to see what everybody else does, and then they kind of do that. And then, like we were in Greek life and stuff, and they had a lot of people working for the school that were supportive, but a lot of times it felt like the school was kind of like they were helicopter parents for not just like Greek life, but a lot of organizations, that they were kind of always hanging over your head, and, you would try to fly and they grab your feet sometimes. But overall, like I would definitely recommend it in the future, like to anyone who wants to come here in the future. And I'll always be like a supporting alumni of the school for sure.
Yeah, I would say like, the school spirit, they knock it out of the park. Like the whole Boise like experience, they like the admissions team at Boise State knocks it out of the park. I'd say they delivered great on classes and that type of stuff, programs. Where they struggle a little bit is like the internal. So I worked for the school all 4 years. I worked in the student union as an AV technician. So I got to sit in and be a part of a lot of the like executive president meetings and stuff like that, where a lot of, especially recently, a lot of the presidential executive searches for that office, everyone's been leaving, because I think it hasn't been ran to its full capability. And like you said, it's a follower school, but it's also like they're very like almost self-centered. Like they're almost scared to venture outside of campus, which sucks because they have a lot of potential and they have a lot of marketing opportunities that they miss. Yes, they do a really good job, I'd say, at marketing to some areas and some demographics. There's a very massive portion of their school that they miss or is misrepresented, and I think that could change and get better. But like he said, it was a great time. I wouldn't change my college experience for the world at all. The Greek life was it, but it's like you got to look across the nation and also the state we're in, and it's just Greek life is not the most popular thing here. We didn't go to college in the South where it's, still very heavily active.
Right. I actually had no idea that BSU had Greek life, like when I was going through college there, because I was working full time as a paramedic. I was going to classes to get my bachelor's on my days off. And so I was like in and out. Like I was one of the older people, in my classes. And I'm like, I'm 26. Like, what are you talking about? I'm old. And, but it was just a different, I wasn't the younger people. I wasn't, your more traditional college student.
18 to 22 range.
18 to 22. If you're over 22, man, you're old in their eyes.
Yeah, no, you really are.
You really are.
People look at you like, oh, what is this person like? But I mean, I would looked at it like, oh, they're just going back to school to get like another degree or, finish or something like that. I wasn't. But yeah, there's people in there that are like, why is this old fart in my class? Like,
or you ask like questions like, oh, you're so old.
But a lot of them are full-time Boise State employees, because if you're an employee that works, I think, over 36 hours, you can take credits for $15.
Wow.
So that's why I was tempted to work at the school full-time. It just didn't work out, but because I would have gone back and got my master's. Just, I don't know what for, but for $15, you can't turn it down.
No, I mean, especially just having that, piece of paper. And I think there's been a drive just within, getting hired on, the more kind of certificates or papers you have underneath of you that they can kind of, bump you up into a higher ladder or higher bracket.
Yeah.
But it's crazy because like it's just a piece of paper at the end of the day. Yep. Like I'm really, really, really happy that I ended up going and finishing my bachelor's. I was actually the first one and only one in my family to do that.
Same.
But it doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like there's nothing really, it's a great experience. It's super awesome. But when I go, to get hired on for another job or something like that, like, is it really going to matter? In some instances, absolutely. Yeah. There are instances that,
you can't be an engineer without a civil engineering degree.
Right. Or a social worker or, these clinicians or a doctor, that absolutely means, like you have to get those things. But your general, population of people, like trade work is way more easily and accessible to start making money off of.
Oh, yeah.
And we don't even push trade schools.
No.
Right.
There's going to be a day where we run out of like plumbers, elevator technicians, like, all the people that, HVAC people, like.
We're already seeing it. I mean, we really are already seeing it, especially, being in the realm of real estate. You see the labor side of it of, your tile guys and your HVAC, like you said, and they're like
mechanics.
They're the older folks that are like, I can't hire anybody. Like they don't know what it is. They're not going to school. They're not learning. I don't have time to teach them. Yeah. We're in years behind, especially farmers. Farmers is, that's one reason why our land is getting bought up like crazy, because it's always been a generational, thing within the family. And now kind of the millennials are like, well, why would I do that if I could go do something different, make, money quicker, faster, easier?
It's like the whole social media and podcast thing. If me and him blow up or your podcast blows up, shit, you're going to quit your day job because you're going to be making money.
Yeah.
And you won't even need a piece of paper to do it, to be an influencer.
Exactly.
You need followers and verification.
Yep.
That's it. Or validation.
Validation for sure. Well, any parting thoughts or, ideas to tell other people about starting a podcast?
I would say go for it. Like, who cares if you don't have the best quality stuff? Like, just take your computer or your phone and just record it, you and your friend, or go on eBay. I just sold an old podcast mic for $20. Like, you can buy them so cheap now, because so many people get into the podcast like world and they realize I can't do this. So, I mean, why not just go out and try it? Like, if you need help, come to SB Studios.
Yeah, there's the pitch.
There is a podcast workshop next week on Wednesday, the 22nd, out in Meridian, I think it is, at 9 to 5 workspaces, something like that.
9 to 5 workspace.
Are you going to that?
I'm going to try. 9 to 5 a workspace is a wonderful working space. I actually know the ladies that run it.
Okay.
And what that facility is basically because so many people have been working from home, but they have kids or they have dogs or they have other things going on. It's just a place for people. I think it's a monthly.
It's like the Kiln workspace too.
Yes,
we just partnered with them as well.
Yes, so you basically can go in and like rent out like
desk space,
desk space. Yeah. So you can have like a monthly subscription to them, to go in whenever you want or how many hours. But it gives people a workspace where it's not a coffee shop. It's not, your side of, the house, or you've made the kids' bedroom into your office as well. So really, really great place. 9 to 5, absolutely. So June 22nd. I don't know if I'll be there. I'm trying to.
It's my birthday, so hopefully I'm not hungover.
Oh, you probably will be. Have a drink for all of us, and we'll have one for you. Yeah, I think it'd be great because, like you have just said, like you just got to go for it, and you'll learn along the way. And there's different things like the titles and the descriptions and the thumbnails and all of these things that you're never going to know. All of those details starting something, whether it be a podcast, whether it be a business. That's what learning's about, and that's what leveraging people and connecting with people is all about.
Yep.
So Daniel, any parting thoughts for the podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I agree, just go for it. And, kind of like the SB Studios motto is, speak, like use your voice. So I think if you just like to talk a lot, or, you
have to get a thought out.
Yeah, like a podcast is a great platform for a lot of different things. Even if like you have no interest in a podcast and you're like, let's say you're an introvert and super shy and you want to kind of get out there, at the very least, doing an episode or two of a podcast is going to get you out of your comfort zone and help you, grow as a person and maybe break out of your shell a little bit.
You don't have to do video. So if you're audio, no one can see you. You could do a totally secretive storytelling podcast where no one knows who you are, your real name, anything. Because you're just an audio voice. You're just a voice.
You're just a voice. And everybody has their own voice.
Yeah.
And I think that is the part, wrapping this up is what podcasts are there for, whether it be for your business, whether it be to just tell stories, whether it be, to educate other people on a certain topic.
There's a lot of people who need that voice.
A lot of people need that voice. And I think you mentioned earlier, like being the best version of you and kind of teaching other people on that is what we can do.
Like your last episode with Anthony, we're trying to get him to start one because he owns a
chiropractic business.
Chiropractic business. I'm sure there's so many people that have chiropractic issues or struggles, and them hearing if he brought in people as clients or past clients to tell their story and their recovery and all that, I'm sure there's so many people that just need that inspiration and that like just listen to help them get through their like whatever they're going through.
Absolutely.
There's a huge market for it.
And if you guys have not actually checked out Anthony Cutting at Active Chiropractic Meridian, he's fantastic. So I've actually, since he came onto my podcast and interviewed, I have started to going to him, and I have an extra vertebrae in my back. I've always had lower back problems. Like I always get out of alignment, all these things, and unbelievable of chiropractic care that he's been able to.
I want to go and just try it.
You should. Yeah. You should reach out to him. He's got some specials going on for them opening up their business. You can do the all core, and that is, you'll have to go to his page and kind of see more of what it looks like. But it honestly looks like an adult, like baby carrier. Like you get strapped in, they tighten it on you, and then this thing literally swings, and you have to keep your back straight, and it keeps your posture. And like, it's really cool because his parents are actually helping them currently right now as he's getting everything up and running. And they came from Arizona, and so his dad will, direct you, and it's unbelievable the amount of core strength that you have to use. So it really isolates your core strength to stabilize your back, especially for women, that have just had babies with pelvic pain and pelvic stabilization. But it is phenomenal. And I promise you, you will be shaking and you'll be sweating at the end. And you're like, what the heck? This was like 10 minutes of me sitting in this chair. No, it's hard.
Maybe we go do a remote podcast at his
You
office.
should.
Yeah.
You should. Yeah, he when I went and got adjusted last week, we did a little 1 minute clip of me coming in there and what it looks like, and the facility is spectacular. It's super clean,
Awesome.
like the way he has it laid out. Just a super great guy.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Dope.
you should get him to come
Yeah.
on and do a podcast as well.
We'll go to him.
Yeah.
We should go to him. We'll try and go to him.
My jaw clicks a lot because I think I sleep like on my chin. So if we can go do a remote podcast there and he can help me
He
out.
can tune you up, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah,
While
I mean,
I'm asking the questions.
he really can. I mean, I'll even be your patient for you because he does these. He talks about in the podcast too. So if anybody's listening, go and listen to Anthony Cutting.
Your last
And
episode.
my last episode. No, 2 episodes ago. 2 episodes. Last
Oh,
episode
you're
was
right.
my father. Anyways, so he does these zones and he stabilizes you off of your zones. And I was like, okay, how are you going to really know, pressing my head, which zone's off? Absolutely, And
So
what's crazy is that after he adjusts you and he describes everything that he's doing, why he's doing it, how it's going to help you. He then re-looks at your zones and presses on the back of your head and you're like, oh, they're cleared. They're gone.
Does he make TikToks of people cracking people's backs? Have you seen those?
Yeah, but you know what's crazy is I feel like he more or less aligns you properly than a cracking.
Okay.
I actually really like that he's not sitting on your back, cracking everything. No, it's very little shifts. And I've grown up with my grandpa in chiropractic, my uncle in chiropractic. And I've kind of always known, right? They're going to pull your neck and it's going to crack really loud. And sometimes it can hurt. And his techniques, he has so many different techniques to avoid that, huge cracking. But you stand up and you're like, oh, wow. Oh, that's how I'm supposed to be standing. I'm so much taller now.
All right.
Yeah. So, I want to thank you both for coming on to the podcast, talking a little bit more about who you guys are and why you podcast. And listeners, definitely check out the episode with Anthony Cutting. You'll figure out more about chiropractic care. You can actually go see him in Meridian itself. Definitely mention that you heard and saw on Raw Thoughts podcast and see what kind of deal he brings up for you. And
go watch our podcast.
Yes.
At You Never Know Podcast on, I think, everything. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, the whole 9 yards. Apple, Amazon, Google, we're on everything. So You Never Know Podcasts.
You Never Know podcast.
Weekly-ish.
Yeah.
Okay, quick question. How do you guys figure out when you guys are going to record in air?
Whenever a guest comes on,
We shoot for every Wednesday.
we shoot for Wednesday or Friday. But whenever a guest comes on, we normally give it a week lead time unless I get super busy and can't edit it. Because
Gotcha.
I obviously have to edit everyone's here first, and then mine comes last. But also mine gets a little bit of special treatment and whatnot, gets edited and stuff. So
Yeah, I can tell. No, I'm just kidding. I'm
know.
just kidding.
but yeah, go check it out.
Yeah, listeners, go check out the podcast. Make sure you subscribe, and share with all of your friends and family. We always love seeing where you're listening and how you're listening to us, or watching, in that matter of fact. So once again, thank you, Ryland and Daniel, for coming on to Raw Thoughts podcast. And
Thank you
we
for
will,
having us.
Thank
we
you.
will see you guys next week.
Can't wait to edit this.
this. Thank you for tuning into the show today. Your feedback is very important to me. If you could leave a review, as well as follow me on Instagram at rawthoughts.podcast and email in at m.rawthoughts@gmail.com if you have any guest suggestions.